it really comes from the fact that I know wholeheartedly that we're doing the best possible to be as humane. The Jewish values that we really believe in, I believe that the IDF is really going and doing those values. IDF, Israel, like we're doing the best to make the best of the terrible situation that we're in.
What is home? Yes, we have our homeland Israel, and yes, we have homes throughout the diaspora. But our current reality is complex. Israel's at war, and anti-Semitism is rising around the world. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for this question of home? Join me, Izzy, as I speak with Israeli and diaspora Jewry to better understand this new complex reality and unpack where we put ourselves in this physical and spiritual war. This is the My Israel Narrative podcast. Hey everyone, today we have the honor of sitting with Aby Volcovich, who has just been given leave, at least for a brief amount of time after serving on the front lines for the past 4+ months since October 7th. So first and foremost, thank you just for everything you've done and are continuing to do. I know I just asked you if you're off for good, and you said it's kind of vacation.
It's a bit complicated, yeah.
A bit complicated. So thank you for really all you're continuing to do and pausing your normal life to make sure that really all of Israel and all of Am Yisrael is safe and protected. So just...
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to dive in. I'd love to hear a little bit. You could share just your background, where you're from originally, maybe a little bit. I know your family had a journey of getting to Israel. Just a little bit about that, kind of how you ended up where you are.
Sure. So I'm originally, I was born in Mexico City, and when I was 6 years old, my parents decided to move to Toronto, Canada. And then essentially I grew up in Canada, and very, very Zionist upbringing, very strong connection to Israel, always going to UJA, Walk with Israel. I was also in NCSY, and overall, like I did summer trips to Israel, bar mitzvahs of cousins and whatnot. So very connected to Israel. And then when I was 18, I took a gap year. Similarly, also my older brother also took a gap year here in Israel. So I also took a gap year, and then on my gap year, I decided that I want to make Aliyah, I want to join the army. So I did that through Nefesh B'Nefesh and also through Garin Tzabar. Joined and drafted into the Nachal Brigade. I was a lone soldier at first, and then afterwards, after a year of being here in Israel alone, with other lone soldiers, my family also decided to make Aliyah. First my sister, then my brother, and then my parents as well. I'm actually right now at my parents' home. I finished the army, then traveled for a little bit, finished university. I studied at, it was IDC, now it's Reichman University. Did business and entrepreneurship. And now that I finished my degree, I started actually working in a nonprofit called DiploAct, which does hasbara and helping with Israeli image around the world, public diplomacy. And literally after a month of working there, the war began. So now that I'm kind of on this somewhat break from reserves, I'm starting to go back to work officially next week, or it really depends on the whole situation of what comes out of it. But yeah, that's essentially a brief summary of my journey to Israel.
I'm sure you got all of it in there, the whole past. I was actually going to ask, how many years ago was it that you moved to Israel to join the IDF?
So I drafted in November 2016, and then I got released in 2019. And ever since my release, I kept doing reserve duty. I ended up becoming a commander in my regular service, and then also in reserve duty, I'm a commander in my squad. And we essentially do reserves when there's no time of war, at least once a year. A lot of times it ends up being 2 or 3 times. And there's different structures of the different exercises or actual guard posts, depending on the year. And then obviously on October 7th, we were all called up to serve. It's called Tzav Shmone. It's the emergency call for all reservists. And I drafted, I think it was at 11 or 10:30. I already got the message on our WhatsApp group to go, and started the whole process of drafting to the war.
Wow. But I want to dive into what that's been like, and also I know you continued kind of like your hasbara duties while you've been serving. But for that, just want to take it back a minute, just to understand how you got to, at the probably young age you were, to decide to go on your own as a lone soldier. I've always found that to be extremely fascinating and beyond courageous for anyone to do. Moving to a country on your own is one thing. Moving to a country to serve in an army, to a foreign country to serve in its army, is a whole other thing. So I guess at what point in your journey did your love or your connection for Israel kind of develop? And you moved from a couple of places, so I don't know, maybe it was connected to the fact that those places you didn't connect to so much, so you want something else, or was it just a strong pull? Just love to hear kind of how that evolution happened for you.
Sure. So there's this saying that I've heard in other expats of any country, really, but once an immigrant, always an immigrant, right? Which means that, we moved from Mexico to Canada. So in Canada, we were always referred to as the Mexican friend or the Mexican person, right? Then I would visit my cousins in Mexico, and I was always the Canadian cousin. So the identity of where you're from was always you're from somewhere else. And when actually visiting Israel on my gap year, and then really feeling, sure, I'm not from Israel, but the feeling was a lot less kind of like from far away, because the essence of the country it was built upon olim, people who came from all over the world. And so every individual in Israel has a grandparent or parent who was in the exact same position that I'm in. And so I just connected more with the people, and overall also growing up very Zionist and very connected to my Jewish identity, just made it make a lot of sense to make that decision while on my gap year. I really connected to the values, to the people, and so that's the answering the question of why to move here. Now, to answer the question of why serve and join the army, I could have waited a few years until the requirement of the age, and then not have to do the army. But I really saw it as, if I have to, if I'm able to move to Israel and make it my home, then I should have the same responsibility as any other Israeli to defend it and to do my part. And so that was the thought process, and I thought it was also an honor. I still think it's an honor to be able to serve and to defend. And it's important, if there was even a decision when I was first drafting of, do I want to go into combat? Do I want to try to go for something more in the intelligence route or in the IDF spokesperson unit and do something in media and advocacy using my English and my Spanish? And I really decided that, I'm able to be combat now. I'm young. I'm able to train and be in combat, and that will, if anything, help out in the future with the skill set and know-how of what a combat soldier goes through, to then later on in life do that same battle of online as a civilian. It doesn't necessarily have to happen within the army. And that's essentially what I ended up doing now that I work at DiploAct, and I've been involved in a lot of other Israel advocacy organizations. And so that was the main reason for drafting. It was more of the duty.
So I just want to let's say like double click, you said when you wanted to make Israel home. So for you, was it kind of clear when you were making Aliyah, you had these other homes in Mexico and Canada and your family were in those places. But when you were deciding to draft and make Aliyah, did you kind of know, okay, like this is it, like this is the home, or was it still a question, something you were kind of feeling out as time went on?
Yeah, it's a little bit cheesy, but the feeling of home was uh, it. In Canada, growing up during Christmas time or Hanukkah time, you're always going to the grocery store and you're seeing Christmas music and the Christmas lights everywhere. And don't get me wrong, it's really pretty and beautiful and really nice, the holiday atmosphere. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's the sense of this isn't my culture, this isn't my reality. And every time there's Hanukkah, like here in Israel, it feels like, wow, okay, like it brings me back to that point of it's so like natural for the average Israeli to not even question it. Um, and it's something that I want to be able to have for my family. Like it was very much looking into the future, that feeling, that sense of like, yeah, this is there's no question. It's like this is our culture, our people, as opposed to that feeling. It could be maybe from like being Mexican, going to Canada, that feeling of an outsider. It just kept on happening, not only as a Mexican in Canada, but also adding Jewish as well. Because I was also in a public school for high school. So it was like two identities there. And don't get me wrong, like Canadians are very friendly, and I did have a lot of friends, very multicultural friendships, but it's still that feeling of like this is my people, the same culture, the same history, the same everything. And so it just made a lot more sense for me to have that for the future that I want in terms of life, building a family here, building a future.
Definitely. I always joked when I've been, I mean, this past year, spent a few days Hanukkah in New York and a few in Israel, and like you walk around the stores the whole month leading up to it, and I'm singing Christmas carols like when it's during Hanukkah, and it's just like so natural because that's the environment you're in, and and I loved it growing up, like just being in that festive environment. But when you realize, like, wait, I have the opportunity to be in that festive environment that I actually connect to, that's actually mine, that's actually what I'm celebrating. It's like, why would I choose one over the other? I think sometimes that's what happens with like just naturally with assimilation and being in other cultures and places, which is a beautiful thing to experience, is that you don't realize that you actually have the same thing within your own culture and your own identity. You don't need to be looking for it elsewhere. Really, Judaism, Jewish people, Israel, being in Israel especially, gives you that whole landscape. Um, so yeah, it's
Right,
definitely
and that's not to take away from any other religion or culture. It's just
right.
it's not yours. So it's that feeling of um, like really now it's really being a tourist to that culture as opposed to living in it and being engulfed by it constantly. Like it's very much nicer to be like, yeah, if I want to go feel the whole Christmas vibe and you travel, go on a ski trip, and great, I'm in a Christmas movie. But my life, my every day to day, it's definitely more. It feels a lot more comfortable not having to. I don't know if the word is justify or like it's almost like, oh, by the way, I'm Jewish. Like
An
keep me
afterthought.
like yeah, it's like an afterthought. It's like yeah, so it's definitely nicer to not even have to really think about it. It's just surrounding you.
Well, curious also to hear you had this, shift in mindset and wanting to make Israel, the place to be for you and all that. How did that kind of evolve with your family? And I actually shout out to your brother Gabe, who is the mastermind behind producing all of this work, and he's told me a little bit from his vantage point, and but I would love to hear from you, like kind of how you saw the evolution happening for your family. Like, was it through hearing about you? Was it they came to it themselves? What was everyone's kind of journey a little bit?
Yeah, so it's very much chicken or the egg kind of question when everyone asks, and it really honestly doesn't really matter who, like who brought who. But yeah, people say that, I came first, then my sister, then my brother, then my parents, and so I brought everyone. But really, it's the values that they instilled in us when we were little. Grew up very Zionist and very connected to Israel and our Jewish identity. And so I think that's what actually brought me to want to end up coming to Israel myself. And then it was all a snowball effect when they did come here. And my dad actually, if you ask him back when we moved from Mexico to Canada, would you rather have gone to Israel? Deep down, I think maybe he would have. He also studied in Israel University. The complication was that my mom doesn't know Hebrew. She's right now also, she's studying. She knows now really, pretty well. She's been in Ulpan. But really, English was a much easier language to pick up. My mom already spoke English. My dad did as well, a little bit less. But and also, Toronto is a lot closer to Mexico, so visiting family is a lot easier for us when we were growing up. So yeah, there's definitely that in terms of the layover in Canada. My dad also always makes the joke, his name is Moshe, or Moy in Spanish. So he always makes the joke that he understood Moshe Rabbeinu exactly what he was actually trying to say. He had a stutter. So when he said Eretz Canaan, he was actually trying to say Eretz Canada. So he understood him, and that's why we went to Canada. And that's the layover in Canada for 12, 13, 14 years, depending on which one of us in the family. But yeah, eventually we all made it here. We're all now, our adult life is here, and it's also a new. I think we're only recently really starting to have a routine because I finished university, my sister's almost done university, but we're now all adults, and it's not more we're living in the nest and dependent on my parents, but it's organizing family activities and whatnot. So I think a lot of families go through this leaving the nest moment of a new structure for kids and parents, that relationship. And I'm really enjoying it so far, to have an adult relationship with my siblings and my parents. So, yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's cool when you see, I always talk, I have two sisters, but even just the way life has progressed, as we got older, as adults, the dynamic changes, you become friends in a different way, you become a unit in a different way. So to also see that evolution threaded through with your journey to Israel, it's probably very, very special.
It is. It's definitely very special.
Yeah, I heard a very funny joke. It was part of a very long story and point analogy. It's actually from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. He was explaining how if Julius Caesar went back to Rome today, and was asked to see all of the things he built and he did, what would he find? Ruins. And if the old Greek emperor did the same thing and went back to Zeus or whatever it is, went back to Greece and asked, can I go see this and the Acropolis? He would just find ruins, and he would find no one who even knew who he was or believed in what he said or any of these things. And then he finished off saying, but if Moshe goes back to Eretz Israel and he gets off the plane, he goes, he meets his driver, he says, Ani Moshe, the driver's going to go back and be like, Ani Moshe. And then they're going to, right off the bat, everything is threaded, everything is connected. He goes, he sees the mezuzah on the wall. It's the same mezuzah that he, Hashem, I believe, commanded him to put up, tell the Jewish people to put up. He goes, he asks for the, whatever. The whole story goes on and on. So, yes, your father, Moshe, took a pit stop in Eretz Canaan. He knew it was Eretz Canaan. So,
he understood the stutter.
There you go. That was really awesome. So also, I'd love for you to explain a little bit how you got into the hasbara piece, because it's one thing to go and serve, physically, and you said you had a little bit of a decision-making, intelligence, and now you've kind of gotten to do both in a way, which is really awesome. At what point did you get more interested in the hasbara piece? Was that also always there?
Yeah, so the diplomacy or the image of Israel around the world, it's always been very important, specifically the fact that, I grew up in Canada and I went to a public school. The last big war or conflict was Tzuk Eitan, Protective Edge, and I was finishing up high school back then, and I was very active within NCSY and also the president of the Jewish Student Union at my high school. And I was very much already online, posting things, videos, and that whole aspect of knowing the facts, knowing the information, knowing the history, to be able to actually hop online and burst all those lies that are being shared and actually share the reality of the Jewish people and of Israel started before actually coming to Israel. And then that was the actual reason I had the confusion of where to draft to. And so it was almost just like going back to that activity of doing Israel advocacy that I had back in high school, and now it's just a lot more reinforced with the knowledge of what it's like to actually be a combat soldier and the understanding of the values of the IDF, the values of the country, having lived in the country for a while. So it just continues, and I think it's a responsibility that, regardless, right now I'm actually working at an organization that does this, but even if I continue later on in life to go work in business, I don't know, whatever I end up doing, I think it's a responsibility that I'll always have upon myself, to be a representative, to be a diplomat of Israel. It's almost like years ago, Jews in the Holocaust that maybe didn't live in Europe when Nazi Germany came to power, they might have been comfortable around the world and maybe heard things that were going on. Obviously, the social media nowadays is way more, everything, but maybe you heard some things that are going on, and it's easy to say, but I can't judge anyone. But I wish more had been done, not only from the Jewish side but from the non-Jewish side, to prevent it from happening. And I think it's everyone's responsibility, not just the Jewish people, to prevent horrors from happening around the world and for truth to be told. Because at the end of the day, if you really come to Israel and meet Israelis, you've been here. People just want to live a normal life. People are just kind. People agree to disagree a lot. And I think that's the reality that people need to see, that it's just a normal country, and all the crazy statements that are said about the politics and the people and the army are just, they're just not true. And it's important for people to really understand them, the reality. So yeah, regardless, going into the future, I think it's something that I encourage all my friends to, even if they're not working in the field, to really take part and also just share their reality. Even that's always enough, to tell their own story and to talk to people and to encourage people around the world to ask questions or to see how you're doing. Like that in itself is already more than watching one video and coming to conclusions from just the small bits of media that algorithms are all put together into one thing to come up with one idea. So I think it's very important to ask rather than make assumptions,
Definitely. Yeah, it's like, with anything in life, people usually like to do their research or understand, and for whatever reason, there's a different rule book when it comes to looking at to Israel, which makes it very challenging.
I wouldn't even say there's a different rule book. I think the fact is that there's just a lot of, in terms of numbers, people don't understand the numbers of what the Jewish people are around the world, and even 1% of the Muslim world is still more than the entire Jewish population. So let's say even less than 1% is the radical side that wants to be death to Israel and death to America. That's still very strong amount of numbers, and that's why we need the rest of the world's support to really understand the reality and to just look for peace. Like, I don't even, you might not agree with Israeli politics, but to want like peace and neutrality and to be able to listen. But it's a matter of numbers. It's not just, people can do a lot of research, and I forget the bias that it is, but you when you end up looking for the same information, it feeds into your own bias. I think it's cognitive bias, if I'm not mistaken. So you're actively looking.
That sounds right.
Yeah, yeah. So you actively look for the things that encourage your initial assumptions, and so you end up finding information that's out there that may not have the full story, but things that did occur. And then when you don't have the whole story, that's where you make those conclusions. And so, yeah, it's like I've gone into conversations with people where they did their research and they read a lot, but they didn't read. Oh, they missed that detail or they missed this, right? And a lot of times I get into these conversations and I share with them like, okay, well, I'd love to read the articles, and I actually go and read all these articles and do the research that they did, and I add, oh, by the way, that exact same article, this happened, this happened, this happened. I build the full story with them, and there's been various scenarios where it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that, thank you, like, and you burst the bubble. And that's what's important, and that's what gives me hope, to be able to see that the bubble is able to be popped for people, people who you think are closed-minded, but with enough patience and hearing them out, you can get through to them. And it's important to realize who you're speaking with, because not everyone is like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's important to create that understanding with people that there's this lack of, or there's this overload of information, and it's hard to know what's real and what's not. But at the end of the day, like, I'm living here, and like whatever is being said on the media or whatnot, like, I'll give you the number of a lot of friends, like, talk to them, ask them their reality, and you remove the bias of press, you remove the bias of whatever it is. And that's what I encourage people to do, to share the real stories.
Yeah, I'll tell you, just by sheer numbers, I've been working on college campuses the past few weeks, helping students there deal with anti-Semitism and all of that's, kind of been in the aftermath the past few months. And when we break down the numbers, I won't say names of universities, but these large universities, I'm talking 50,000 students, and you ask the students, okay, if we look at it, how many people, if we break down into 4 groups, you have, well, let's just do 3. You have the Jewish students, you have the non-Jewish middle, and the non-Jewish extreme. Non-Jewish extreme being your people that are the protests and making video content and all these things. And we asked them, how many people would you say are active in that non-Jewish extreme? Say 100, maybe at the peak 200. And we're talking about a university with 50,000 students. But those few hundred make enough noise and put out enough information to drown out and make it seem like there's thousands of people that are behind their cause and supporting. Whereas the truth is, a lot of them, most of them, majority, we could safely say the majority, fall into the category of people you're talking about. That when you bring to them, you share some more information, you try and open up the dialogue, it can really change something. Not always. I'm sure still have people in that group, and I
really think that people come with really good intentions. The way the narrative is being told is innocent Palestinian people, innocent this, and you just want to, it's goodwill. Like, that's actually a very healthy and good intentions, and that's essentially the technique that really works. Is like, hey, like, honestly, I appreciate your intentions and I appreciate your goodwill and care for humanity, but humanity as a whole, here's the whole picture of what's going on, and let's care for humanity together. And that's really what I believe Israel is doing, and is caring for Israelis and also Palestinians. Like, the terror organization Hamas, like, is not, like, that's what we're targeting. We're not targeting the innocent. Now there's the whole debate of numbers in terms of who's innocent, who's not, but I don't want to get into that too much. But it's really care that people have is what needs to be catered, because then ultimately when they hear the information from a place of calm and mutual respect for one another, I think that's the most important aspect, to have that mutual respect in the conversation, whether it's written or actual face-to-face. Once there's that mutual respect, then you can actually have a conversation and not a banter back and forth between, like, oh, I heard this, I heard that, and then you're not actually listening to each other. And that's, I think, where when I tell them, like, okay, cool, I love to read your article, I love to see where you're getting your information from, and doing that extra step of, like, you could be correct, but I'd love to bring my perspective to what you're you're making the accusations for. And I think that's where the human aspect of it's humanizing the situation and humanizing the extreme views that people have, and realizing that, okay, wait, there's more to the whole story, and that's when it really works.
It's just remembering that humans are ultimately driven by emotions, and if you can speak to someone's emotion, where their heart is at, that's where the change happens. So a couple more
100%.
questions. One thing,
Sure.
speaking about emotions, how do you, a lot of people are trying to do this hasbara work maybe on their own, and they're posting things on social media, and a lot of what I've, even before this war, a lot of feedback you get is it's just so frustrating, it's infuriating. So I would love to hear from you as someone who's on the front lines. You're there, you're seeing, if we could talk about truth, black and white, in every form, you're seeing that firsthand. And then on top of it, you're still having to go and, in a way, negotiate and have these conversations and still prove yourself. How do you do so with composure? Because you also, I just want to point out for everyone, like, you've been posting videos and really in concrete ways, sharing information, and won't put a link to your Instagram, as people should really follow along. You're doing amazing stuff. Like, how do you do that with such composure and calm when you yourself are seeing what's happening firsthand?
Uh, yeah, that's a very good question, because I think that's also a very important aspect to the success of things, to having that composure. And it really comes from the fact that I know wholeheartedly that we're doing the best possible to be as humane and the values, the Jewish values that we really believe in. I believe that the IDF is really going and doing those values. IDF, Israel, like, we're doing the best to make the best of the terrible situation that we're in. So once I know that, and I'm wholeheartedly understanding that and understanding the reality and the facts, then I don't need to get, excited or really annoyed or really mad at whatever accusations I hear, because I already know the worst things that people are going to tell me. Like, you already know all the terrible accusations that exist out there. So once you already know and you go into it thinking, like, this person hates me and thinks I'm a baby killer, then you're already past that emotional drain of what they might think. And then it's really just coming out of it the other way around and showing them that you're not that, as opposed to telling them, because you can tell facts, but it's really showing them that you're a calm individual and you just want to have a normal conversation. And this is actually what I believe in. This is the actual values that the army believes in. This is the actual reality that is going on. Then you're showing a different reality. You're not just telling it. And that's, I think, the upper hand that we have, is we can actually show a reality because this is the reality. I'm not lying. There's nothing being made up. And I'm very confident with the facts that I know, the history that I know. So I think that's also an aspect that not a lot of people have. I do have the front line perspective and the reality of what's going on today. But one thing I encourage, your viewers, my viewers, is to get informed of history, understand the Jewish history, understand our Jewish connection to the land, understand the Palestinian connection to the land. Because it's important not to deny that there's a people who call themselves today Palestinian people who live here, and we have to figure out what to do with that. Like, what do we do with this reality? It's important to be human about it, and not like, oh, but this happened and this happened, and it's with the whole conflict, people try to make it black and white, but we're humans, and it's so much more complex and layered. So it's important to really be open to having that conversation of that complexity. Because a lot of people are like, oh, but you did this and you're bad. Done. Bad. That's the label. We're moving forward. But no, it's like, okay, I might be bad in this scenario, but we like, maybe it didn't really happen like that. Like, it's getting into more depth with every accusation and every point, and then you're able to humanize it. That's the more important part of it.
Yeah, I think what really resonated with what you said is you have to know your truth, and then you can show your truth. Know it before you can show it. I think sometimes people, especially right now, this is not anyone's fault, but we were kind of like knocked off our feet. So everybody was living their lives outside of Israel, but okay, you were connected, you felt like maybe connected to your Judaism thing, but it wasn't so viscerally a part of, it has touched a lot more people, a deeper chord with a lot of Jews now, their identity to their Judaism, their identity to Israel. But what kind of was missing, as much as you had like an event that kind of caused this emotional reaction, was creating a real foundation of knowing your truth of who you are. So right now everybody's being awakened and they're feeling like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm a Jew. Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm connected to Israel. But a lot of these major questions of like, wait, who am I really as a Jew? Who am I really as a Israeli? Because really we all technically are Israeli, even if we don't live there. Like those are sort of missing. So I think like there's a little bit of this gap that, again, not to anyone's fault, is causing more frustration in trying to show your truth and trying to really exemplify what that is. So I think there's this middle ground of like almost taking it upon ourselves, all of us, because everybody has a gap that they can fill, of really like, who am I? Who am I as
Yeah,
a
it's
Jew?
almost it's a dissonance of like knowing, wait, but like no, that's not what it like. You know in your heart that
Yeah.
all these accusations, all these things that are being said, it's like that's just not true. And then people ask you like, oh yeah, why isn't it true? And then people freeze because they don't feel confident enough to be able to spitball and say the things to the proof to say why that's not true. The proof that they have is that they've been to Israel. They know they have Israeli friends. They know they people in Israel are just friendly 'cause when they came here, and that's almost it, right? But people need to understand how to take that individual story of them actually visiting Israel, the friends that they have in Israel, the values that they saw in Israel, and utilize that to their best of their capabilities to really push that narrative forward. And additionally, it's like you said, that homework of you have to take it upon yourselves to understand the history, because since you don't have the, living here and all the political history or whatnot, you need to arm yourself with that information. When I talk to people around the world about how they can best, do their part, I always tell them like, to be a combat soldier, we did training for 8 months to a year, some people even 2 to 3 years, depending on your position. And it's a lot of training to understand the profession of being a combat soldier and be able to defend our families, our neighbors, and tourists when they visit. Now, that same line of defense that takes a long time to build, that same training needs to occur with the battlefield on social media. You need to have a background on an understanding of the conflict. And it's something that, like you said, I think a lot of people just didn't realize they needed it. And now is the wake-up call of people understanding, okay, whoa, like I need to figure out how I can defend my Jewish identity, defend Israel. How do I do this? And a lot of people are, in a way, playing catch-up. And you know what? It's the best you can do, but I really encourage it and try to get to that point as best as you can. And it's my efforts to help facilitate that for people.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say also. Like, I think because a lot of people respond, and even myself included, like, I wouldn't say I'm the strongest with like coming and bringing out the facts and the figures and whatever, but I know my resources, like I know if like I have somebody coming and they're asking all these crazy things, I know where to point them and I can feel confident that person can take them through a conversation. But it's not even like, it's not a handoff because like I don't believe it. It's a handoff because like I know I do and feel connected to this truth. And here's, a resource that can actually walk you through it and explain to you what the ins and outs are. And there's so many resources today that like I think people just need to be more aware of. It could really help with all this. But the piece that I think is specifically incumbent on every person, every Jew right now, is to make sure that feeling is grounded in something real, because that's what makes you hold on to it, and that's what makes you continue the fight and be able to say and stand behind. Yeah, I can hear what you're saying, Abby, and I could hear what you're saying for all these different organizations, and I connect, and I know, and I don't start questioning, but is that really true? Because I heard something else. You know deeply.
Right.
There's no question about it, because that's also been happening. You have a lot of Jews who, unfortunately, have been hearing things from the other side, and they start to quit. They start to waver. Why? Because their foundation wasn't strong enough. So make your foundation strong enough. Understand who you are as a Jew, who you are as a Jewish person connected to Israel, what that looks like. Ask all the hard questions for yourself. And when you feel confident enough, it's not to say that you have to now go and stand and, be able to have a debate. And I do think certain people can be different kochot, different strengths to do different things,
For sure.
but know yourself and then know your resources and know how to deal with that minefield per se. It's really important. But I guess, yeah, what we're both saying is like at this point, it's like nobody can really be like hands off and just be like, oh, I'm just gonna like.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. We have a clear scenario of when people were hands off, and it's doing something. I think even with art, like anything, any medium. Like the other day, I saw the dress with the bring them home ribbon.
Yeah. Montana.
Any medium is a way of making an impact, and it doesn't have to be like there's no history involved there or the politics involved there. It's literally just talking about the hostages, and so it's literally doing your part in whatever capability, and it's self-awareness of knowing what you're strong at, right? Because I know the IDF values and what it's like to be a soldier, but yeah, history, I don't know everything. I'm not Wikipedia, and I'm not claiming to be. What I do know, I give forward and I use that to my advantage, but it's also having the confidence to say like, oh, you know what, I'm not too confident with this information, but let's look it up together. And you go through it with the individual, and it's having that what's it called, the decency and the humility to claim that, you know what, let's figure it out. Like, let's call up my friend, he's actually there right now, and it's having those resources, because also not a lot of people have those resources. So it's finding them, looking for them, and then you using them to your advantage wherever you're put in a certain scenario.
Yeah, I'll just say one last thing was it came up last conversation I had on here, that one of the things that attracted me to Judaism like so strongly at one point in my life was this notion that we can ask questions, and like all questions are on the table. And if somebody doesn't have an answer to your question, be it a big rabbi, but they don't feel defeated. They don't sit there, and if they're strong in who they are as a leader, they don't melt away and say, oh, that's embarrassing, why'd you ask me such a thing? They'll say, you know what, that's a great question. I'm gonna look into that for you. And they're gonna have conversations, and they're gonna bring it to the table. People always joke, what do you walk into a yeshiva, people don't understand this, like what happens behind closed doors. What's happening? You have two people sitting across the table from each other, arguing, questioning. It's not about, I mean, that's who we are as a people. So yeah, we're put in this predicament, and it might feel frustrating, but it's in our blood to know how to take challenges, how to dig deep, and to get to the root of it. So
it's not shying away from the questioning, and really there's no shame in having that, like, or missing that knowledge. Like that's actually I think a strength, knowing that knowing what you're missing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you again for everything you're doing. The front lines, the sidelines, from everywhere, from every angle. Really, you're just doing a lot for Am Yisrael right now, and I hope you get some well-deserved rest and time to be for a minute, and just continue to stay safe, and thank you for protecting Am Yisrael.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor. So yeah, hopefully, the hostages get released soon, and we can end the hate with Hamas, Hezbollah, and any other form of Amalek that wants to end with our people. Because ultimately, we just want to live in peace. So, amen.
Amen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Israel Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along and subscribe. Until next time, Am Yisrael Chai.